Um, All right. So one of the most critical parts about doing any woodworking project is our assembly. There's so many ways that we can get this wrong, and the easiest way of making sure that the glue up or the assembly will go well is to do a dry fit. So basically, you're clamping your project together in the same way you're going to with glue, but no glue. So for this small box, I'm using 5 clamps. Sometimes we'll use as many as 6 or 7, depending on how stubborn things are going. So with the dry fit, what we're looking for is to make sure that any inside surfaces are properly sanded and fitting together nicely. I'm looking specifically at the groove or at the joint between the rabbet and the ends. I'm looking at the bottom and the top to make sure that there aren't any gaps on the inside and also underneath. So with a box like this, the most typical problem is your bottom is too big. If you put it together with clamps, no glue, and you find that, that there's gaps, it's an easy thing to take it apart, make your bottom a little bit smaller, and redo the dry fit again. So I just want to go over where the clamps are going in this case. I have one long clamp that's clamping through the ends, and that's to try and make sure that the ends are fitting fully into the depth of the dado, or into the depth of the rabbets. I will be possibly moving this one long clamp around into different areas. And then I have 4 clamps that are clamping parallel through the ends, through the rabbets. That's the most important part. So these 4 clamps are the most important clamps. And you'll notice that I've put them on in the same direction so that this sits nicely on a table like that for the glue to dry. So if we take a look, there's no gaps. There's a little bit of a shadow line at the top there, but there's no gaps at the bottom. And same thing, the length of the bottom is appropriate. There aren't any gaps on the inside. So I'm comfortable to go ahead and do my glue up. When I do the dry fit, part of it is preparing all of my clamps, that they're the right size, that they're in the right locations, that I'm organized. I also have a square here. I'll show you what I do with that a little bit later. And the idea is I don't mess with anything. So when I'm taking the box apart to put back together again, I'm basically unfolding it. I'm going to make sure that I put it back in exactly the same way it was, because every once in a while you might have a corner of a box or a corner of a table that works really well together, but doesn't work at all in a different organization or a different layout. So I've kind of unfolded my box. I'm going to put glue on the rabbets. I'm looking.
Mr. Kennis, please contact Karen in the office. Mr. Kennis, please call the office. Thank you.
So the most important part of the glue up is to get a reasonable amount of glue on that surface. That's where most of the surface area is. I'm spreading it out with my finger. This glue is water-based, it's non-toxic, it's not dangerous, I wouldn't lick it. And once you start putting glue on these joints, you have about 5 minutes to get your box together and clamped properly. So it's something where you don't want to be messing around with it and distracted, but you also don't need to be in a terrible rush. So relaxed, confident, prepared, it's going to go well. As soon as you're a little bit panicked or in a rush or disorganized, there's problems. So I'm going to try to come up to the camera and show you. I've got a little bit of glue on the vertical wall of the rabbet, and I've got a nice thin film that's maybe a little heavy on that wide surface. So once I've spread it out so that I've got a decently thin, Hopefully you can see that thin reflection there. That's about the right amount of glue. I'll spread this surface out as well. I'm okay to have a little bit of glue on that vertical surface. I'd try not to have a lot of glue on that surface. And if I do get stuff up close to the inside, I usually try and wipe it out with a clean finger. So I don't want to have glue up at the top because I don't want glue on the inside of my box. I'm reasonably careful with that wet finger that I don't put it all over my nicely sanded surfaces. Glue actually prevents finish from sticking properly to the box. It also, if you were going to stain it, it prevents the stain from going on evenly. So, you know, I'm not panicking, I'm not rushing, but I am working consistently and making sure I get this back together in a reasonable period of time. When I put these on, I am trying to make sure that I've got the top surface level. I'm putting these clamps on so that they're parallel, and I do want to make sure that I'm squeezing these. It's not a good idea to put the clamps on loosely. So I'm just working my way around, and I make sure that these clamps go on parallel to the ends and that I haven't generated any gaps. So the 4 short clamps are the ones that go on first. Once I've done that, the long clamp goes on, and I'm going to look all the way around my box and see if there's any gaps that I need to worry about. So there's a little gap up at this top corner that I'm going to fix, and otherwise that's looking pretty good. Top side's good, bottom side's good. I don't have any gaps along the sides there, so this is going pretty well. When I release that clamp, I'm just double checking that a gap hasn't appeared at the bottom, and I'm moving this clamp to the top to see if I can squeeze that little gap out. And it looks pretty good. So when I do that, I go back onto the bottom and just double check that I haven't created a gap somewhere else when I put that one clamp back on. And the final thing that I do, whoops, I put my pencil down somewhere. Weird. The final thing that I do before I walk, or there's 2 final things I do before I walk away from the box. One is I check that the corners are square. So I do that with a square. I'm checking that the body of the square goes against the side of my box, and I want to see a consistent gap along that edge, and I flip it. I check both ends. That looks nice and square. So that's good. The last thing I do before I walk away from this is I put my initials on the side and the time that I've glued it at so that we know when we can use the clamps for a different project. So there's the glue up. Not a big panic. Goldilocks amount of glue, just a thin film. And I do need to leave this overnight for the glue to fully cure. Thanks for watching.